Alright, it's finally time to talk about one of my favorite Pixar movies of all time, The Incredibles. While I love Incredibles 2, today I just want to focus on the first one. The first Incredibles came out in the early 2000s, and when it did, it was all the rage. I grew up with this movie, and it very quickly became one of my favorite films. And that is simply because it is so endlessly rewatchable. If The Incredibles is on, no matter what, I stop what I'm doing and always watch the film. I think a big reason for the movie's success are the characters, and more specifically, how the film depicts self-worth through the family of supers. Let's start with the main character, Mr. Incredible himself. Now, what I love about this movie is that the theme of the film is tied directly to the character arcs. At the beginning of the film, in the prologue, Mr. Incredible is shown at the top of his game. The world perceives him in a positive light, and as a result, he's truly living in his glory days. After the supers go into hiding, his self-worth plummets because the world is no longer perceiving him as a hero. Even though Bob tries to help people out at the insurance company, it still isn't enough for him to be satisfied with himself, because he pegs his self-worth on how the public perceives him. At the start of the film, all Mr. Incredible wants is to be the hero again and to be perceived as the hero again. By the end of the film, though, he realizes that all this time his self-worth shouldn't be tied to what the world thinks, but instead it should be tied to the love and success he has with his family and the internal knowledge that he's helping people. I think this whole idea is really summed up quite beautifully in the conversation that Bob and Helen have in the living room at night. In this conversation, Helen is basically accusing Bob of missing out on what's happening in the family, and they talk about Dash's graduation, of him moving from the 4th grade to the 5th grade. This was always one of my favorite moments for the film, when Bob says they keep creating new ways in celebrating mediocrity. This line is basically the theme of the film hidden in this conversation. Bob's internal struggle is that because he once was super and perceived as that, it is impossible for him to feel good enough for himself when he is anything less than that. His life at the current moment is the very definition of mediocrity. He lives in a modest house with a good enough desk job with a wife and 3 kids. With his thinking, he can't celebrate in his current life because he knows he's not living up to his full potential. So when his wife asks him to celebrate a version of himself that he feels less proud of, he simply can't. Bob can only feel worthy of himself again when he accepts to celebrate life in general, not just the glory days, but also the mediocre ones, and most importantly, he realizes that the days he has with his family and gaining their love and respect is more important than whether or not the world views him as a super. Really quickly, I would like to hit on Dash and Violet because I feel like they also fit into this theme. Another great scene of the film is when Helen is driving Dash home from school, and Dash doesn't understand why he can't go out for sports and use his talents. Instead, he is forced to fit into a mediocre role and be like everyone else, even though he isn't. Dash's self-worth is low at the start of the film because he views his powers as something to hide and almost be ashamed of, rather than something that he can utilize to help him. My favorite scene, though, in all of The Incredibles is when Dash realizes his own self-worth. He's running on the island and starts to run on the water. The music swells and you can see Dash with the biggest smile in the world. In this moment, he feels worthy of himself and of his powers because he is finally using his powers and his innate skills to help him. He doesn't have to be ashamed of them anymore. Similarly with Violet, Violet's self-worth is so low at the start of the film, she can't even talk to the boy that she likes. And it's because she has been told to oppress herself and her powers. She knows her family is different and she can't fully embrace it, instead she has to hide it. Only by the end, when she also unlocks her full potential, does her confidence boost, and she can finally break out of her comfort zone and even ask Tony Reiniger out on a date. I think it is so interesting that the kids' storylines are all about embracing their superpowers and the extraordinary, but Bob's arc is more about celebrating the normal and mediocrity of life. I think with these 3 character arcs, we can really get a good idea at what Pixar is trying to tell us here. and that is to embrace your self-worth regardless of your skills or position in life. Be your true self, but don't seek something incredible to the point where you can't celebrate the mundane and mediocrity of life. Life is made up of small moments and big ones. You have to have both for a fulfilling life. So basically, in conclusion, yes, aim to save the world, but don't lose yourself while trying to do it to the point that you can't even appreciate spending a dinner at night with your family just talking about your days that you had at work or school. So that was my video on The Incredibles. I hope you guys really liked it. What Pixar movie should I talk about next? I really love talking about Pixar films because there's so much here to talk about because they really dive into character and theme in every single one. Well, except for maybe Cars 2. And with that, I hope you guys have a good one. Stay safe and remember, adventure starts with you. I'll talk to you guys soon.